I sat near the back third row from the exit in a blazer that didn't quite fit the occasion. Around me, dress whites shimmered under the light's shoulders, square metals, polished shoes like mirrors. The air smelled like starch and history. This was Jake Winslow's promotion ceremony. My younger brother. My father's favorite story. Everyone knew Jake. One of the sharpest seals of his cohort, someone behind me whispered. A real Winslow, another replied, and I didn't even flinch. I'd heard that phrase my whole life. They didn't see me. They didn't recognize me. To them, I was just Claire, the daughter who couldn't hack it, the dropout, the one who tried the Navy thing for a while before vanishing into some vague IT job no one bothered asking about. That was the story my family told. And they told it so often, I think they started to believe it. Maybe I did too for a while. I adjusted the cuff of my blazer fingertips, brushing the place where my real uniform sleeves used to end. Colonel Claire Winslow, Naval Cyber Command. But not today. Today, I was just a shadow at the edge of my brother's spotlight. Up front, my parents were seated like royalty. Admiral Richard Winslow, retired, still standing ramrod straight in his civilian suit, and my mother Diane Pearls at her throat, her hand resting lightly on Jake's arm. She looked proud, the kind of proud that could break a daughter if she let it. I had no plans to be seen, no intentions of being anything but polite and invisible. But when General Mark Lyman stepped to the podium, broad, composed, the kind of man who never fumbled a word, his gaze swept the crowd, once then landed on me. It stayed there. He paused. Just long enough to shift something in the air. I didn't move. Not yet. I was born into the kind of family where rank came before name. In Norfolk, Virginia, that wasn't rare. Every other house had a flag on the porch and a story about someone who served. But in the Winslow house, service wasn't a calling, it was a bloodline. My grandfather commanded destroyers in the Pacific. My father, Admiral Richard Winslow, led operations in the Gulf and briefed presidents. I learned to say "I, sir" before I learned to ride a bike. We didn't take family vacations, we transferred duty stations. The living room was a museum of awards and folded flags, and no one ever touched the wall with his bronze star. There were rules, unspoken but ironclad. Men served, women supported. The Winslow men fought, bled, commanded. The women stood straight at ceremonies and made perfect potato salad. That was the shape of pride. It wasn't cruel, it was tradition. It was what worked, and I ruined the symmetry. I wasn't loud about it. I just didn't fit where I was told to go. While other girls were watching music videos or practicing pageant walks, I was in the garage taking apart an old radio just to figure out how the signal moved. At 9, I beat Jake in a logic game our father brought back from Japan. He threw the board away that night, said it was missing pieces. At 12, I started staying up after lights out, sneaking into my dad's home office. He thought I was sleeping. I was reading old Navy encryption manuals like bedtime stories. I liked the way they made me feel like I was inside something no one else could touch. Then, one evening, he caught me. I was sitting at his desk decoding a cipher from an old Pacific Fleet drill. The solution came to me fast. I scribbled it out on a yellow legal pad and leaned back proud. He stepped into the doorway. I looked up smiling. I think I cracked it. He walked over, glanced at the paper, and read the sequence. Then he did something I'll never forget. He laughed. Not cruelly, not kindly either. Just that kind of dismissive chuckle that turns your face warm and your spine cold. He ruffled my hair and said, "Stick to cheerleading, Claire. This stuff's for the men who run the show." Then he left, and I sat there staring at the legal pad like it had betrayed me. I didn't cry, I didn't speak, but something in me went quiet that night. Not broken, just sealed. From then on, I knew if I wanted to be seen, I'd have to earn it somewhere outside our house, and maybe never bring it back in. By the time I turned 17, I'd stopped sharing anything that mattered. I still came to dinner, still asked about Jake's training or Mom's book club. I smiled in photos. I played the daughter well. But the part of me that counted the part building something in silence stayed tucked away. That year, I applied to the United States Naval Academy without telling anyone. I trained at dawn. Ran 6 miles every morning, memorized specifications for nuclear subs, cracked encryption challenges over lunch. I didn't date, didn't go to prom. I wasn't rebelling, I was preparing, and no one noticed. When the acceptance letter came, it arrived in a plain envelope. No golden seal, no fanfare, just words that changed everything. We are pleased to offer you admission. I stared at it for an hour. Not because I doubted I deserved it, but because I wasn't sure what to do with the joy. Where do you place it when there's no one to hold it with you? That night, I brought the letter to dinner. My hands trembled. I tucked my hair behind my ears 3 times before I spoke. Annapolis, I said, laying the envelope down like evidence. I got in. There was a pause. Then my father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He didn't smile. He didn't even reach for the letter. You'll crumble under pressure, Claire. Basic's gonna send you crying home. He pulled out his wallet and set a crisp $100 bill on the table, then turned to Jake. Bet she drops by week 4. Jake chuckled. Not mean, just comfortable, like it was obvious. Mom reached for my hand. Her voice was soft. Honey, you're so bright. You don't need to prove anything. You could teach, marry well, be safe. Safe. I looked at the money, at Jake's easy grin, at my mother's gentle retreat. The air felt thick. I said only this, I'm going. My voice didn't shake, but something inside me shifted away from them. They didn't drive me to Annapolis, said it was too far, too much traffic. I took a Greyhound, 6 hours with a duffel and no goodbye hug. I watched them from the window, Dad standing with arms crossed, Mom dabbing her eyes, Jake checking his phone. For a moment, I wondered if I was making a mistake. Then the bus turned and the house slipped out of view. And that thought never came back. Annapolis didn't ease you in. From the moment I stepped off the bus, it was noise and order and motion. Names barked, boots hitting pavement, someone yelling before I could even breathe. And I loved it. Not because it was easy, it wasn't. But because for the first time in my life, I was somewhere no one knew I was supposed to fail. Still, it didn't take long before the whispers started. She's a girl, and she's not even that tall. Winslow, as in Admiral Winslow. She must be here on legacy. They didn't know my father would rather eat his medals than vouch for me. During live fire week, I checked out my rifle and noticed something was off. The sights were misaligned subtly, but enough. One wrong shot and someone could have been hit. Or me. I flagged it. Got told maybe you bumped it. I hadn't. Someone wanted me shaken. It worked. That night in my bunk, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I was already starting to crack. 3 weeks later, during a cyber simulation drill, I was mid-hack tracking a threat scenario when a surge blew through my station. It knocked me backward hard. The flash fried the interface. And my wrist. Pain radiated up my arm like a fuse had been lit inside the bone. Diagnosis: nerve damage. Recommendation: surgery, months of rehab, possible discharge. I didn't cry. Not in public, but in the infirmary when the curtain closed and the lights dimmed. I lay there watching shadows move across the wall, and for the first time I let myself wonder if maybe my father had been right. I wrote home. Just once. Not asking for help, just trying to anchor myself to something that felt familiar. I got a response 2 weeks later. Mom's letter was kind if you didn't read too closely. She talked about the garden, the neighbor's new dog, and a distant cousin's engagement. She ended with, "You've always been so bright, Claire. Maybe this is a sign to try something more stable." No letter from my father. Nothing from Jake. And then Lieutenant Sarah Denev walked in. She didn't knock. She didn't ask how I felt. She dropped a manila folder on my tray and said, 3 ciphers. Solve them by Monday. I blinked at her. She pointed to the splint on my wrist. "You've still got a brain, don't you?" That was how it began. Every week she brought more, harder puzzles, faster timers, impossible simulations. When I faltered, she snapped, "The Navy doesn't need polished. It needs pressure forged." I didn't know it then, but she was handing me the only thing I'd needed since the day I left home. A reason to believe I could belong even if no one was watching. I stayed. Finished rehab with a brace on my wrist and steel in my spine. The pain never fully left, but I learned how to move with it, how to carry weight differently, How to type again slower at first, then faster than before. I trained when no one watched, studied while others slept. By graduation, I was in the top 5% of my class. I stood at attention in my dress whites medals, still warm from the last polishing. My posture perfect, my salute sharp. My family came just as they said they would. My mother wore navy and pearls. My father in full suit and tie nodded with formality. Jake was tall now, 19, still smug around the eyes. They clapped when my name was called, quietly. No cheering, just polite acknowledgement like I'd passed a test they hadn't studied for. At the reception, my father shook my hand like I was someone else's daughter. "You made it through," he said, his tone flat. "But the real Navy's a different beast. That's where we'll see what you're made of." I smiled. Not out of warmth, just out of instinct. Then I turned away before I said something I couldn't take back. I didn't bring up my orders, Naval Cyber Command, or the commendation waiting on my desk. They hadn't asked. So I didn't offer. Over the next year, I ran lead on an operation tracing a cyber attack targeting U.S. ports. Thousands of lives were on the line, billions in infrastructure. We stopped it barely. My name was on the after-action report top line. That night, I called home. Mom answered distracted. "That's nice, dear, but when are you thinking of settling down?" My father got on the line next. He didn't ask what the operation was, didn't ask what my team had done. "Lieutenant Command's a stepping stone," he said. "Most don't last there. Don't get cocky." I hung up staring at the screen, the commendation still in my lap. It was the first time I understood that they didn't just misunderstand me. They had chosen not to see me at all. That Christmas, the house smelled the same clove roast, the faint bite of pine needles. But the silence underneath it had changed. Jake had just finished SEAL training. His uniform was new, the insignia still stiff on his chest. He wore it like it belonged to him before he'd even earned it, and to my parents it did. The living room was already decorated in his honor photos, on the mantel a flag pin in every guest's lapel. His future was the only story being told. "Jake's the real thing now," Dad said to one of the neighbors. "He's where the Winslow legacy lives on." I sat on the couch, gift in my lap, waiting for the right moment to speak. I had just returned from a black ops simulation that intercepted an international sabotage attempt. My team had received classified recognition. I had been promoted again faster than expected. It wasn't something I could share fully, but I thought maybe some part of it could be enough. So I began gently. "We just wrapped a major protocol operation," I said, voice steady. "It prevented a lot of damage. A lot of people are safe tonight." Dad looked up from carving the roast. Not cruel, just unimpressed. "Claire's doing her computer thing," he said. "Jake's out there leading men into the real stuff." The room chuckled. Even Jake gave a crooked grin. "Hope your Wi-Fi held up, sis." I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He looked away. Later in the kitchen, I helped Mom with the dishes. She handed me a towel and touched my shoulder like she still believed that was love. "You always were the smart one," she said softly. "Just not built for the other path." That was when it happened. I didn't snap, didn't yell. I just stopped. Stopped trying to be seen. Stopped volunteering updates. Stopped giving them the pieces they never wanted to hold. That night, after the gifts were opened and the guests had gone, I gathered my things and left without making a sound. No one asked why, and I never offered. The invitation arrived in a thick white envelope. Inside gold lettering spelled out what I already knew. Jake Winslow, newly minted SEAL lieutenant, would be honored at Coronado Naval Base in 3 weeks. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for 5 days. Some mornings I almost threw it away. Other nights I caught myself rereading it as if hidden between the lines was a reason not to go. My husband Adam watched me quietly. He didn't press. When I finally spoke, my voice surprised even me. "I'm going." He nodded, jaw set. "You don't owe them anything." "I know," I said, "but Jake's still my brother." We both knew I wouldn't wear the uniform. This was his day, not mine. I chose a simple navy blazer, a white blouse flats, polished but unassuming, hair in a low bun. No medals, no insignia. The bars and stars I'd earned stayed locked in a case back home. I drove alone, rehearsed my neutral smile, braced for Dad's comments, Mom's concerned glances, Jake's easy jokes. At the base, I merged with the crowd slipping into the line of guests. It was a warm day. The sun reflected off every shoulder board in sight. They spotted me in the parking lot. "Claire, you made it," Mom chirped, hurrying over. She wore coral, always the opposite of whatever I picked. Dad stood beside her, hands behind his back. "Glad you could show," he said, the way people do when they don't expect much. Jake grinned and gave a half shrug. "Didn't think you'd want to relive old Navy memories." "I'm just here to celebrate," I said. Inside the auditorium, flags lined the stage. A string quartet played softly, seats filled with officers, families, commanders. I sat near the aisle, alone. Ceremony protocol began, colors presented, anthems sung, names called. Then General Mark Lyman took the stage. He was tall, composed. His voice had that calm, practiced clarity. He praised Jake, outlined his performance, his leadership, his future. Then his eyes swept across the room and landed on me. They didn't move. His voice hesitated only a breath, but I felt the shift. Something small in the air changed. He adjusted his notes, continued. I lowered my gaze, willed myself invisible, but I knew what was coming. The final words of commendation passed. Applause rose, then fell, and then came the moment. General Lyman stepped down, walked straight into the crowd, toward me. He stopped, saluted. "Colonel Winslow." It was loud enough for the rows around us to hear. "Your cyber framework saved my team during the Koran breach." I never got to say thank you. The room froze. Conversations cut short. Heads turned. Mom gasped. Her hand flew to her chest. She staggered into a chair. Dad stood motionless, jaw slack. Jake didn't speak. He just stared like someone had rewritten everything he knew. More voices joined. "Wait. Colonel Winslow." The blackout op. A younger officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, your protocols now required reading in Joint Command." I stood up slowly, my blazer suddenly too thin. "Thank you, General," I said evenly. "But today's not mine. It's my brother's." He paused, then nodded with respect. "Understood. But we know who you are." And just like that, the story they told about me cracked. They found me just off the main corridor near a small conference room with the door still half open. My mother was pale, one hand gripping the back of a chair. Jake stood beside her, still in uniform, arms crossed like he hadn't decided whether this was real or not. My father was pacing slow and stiff, like someone walking through a memory he didn't trust. When I stepped in, he stopped. "Colonel," he said, not loud but sharp. "What kind of game is this?" I closed the door behind me. "It's not a game." He took a step forward. "You let us believe." "No," I said. "You believed what was easiest. I didn't correct you." Mom spoke next, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell us we didn't know?" "Claire, how could we not know?" I looked at her, not with anger, just quiet clarity. "Because you didn't want to." "That's not fair," she whispered. "Isn't it?" I asked. "Every time I tried to share something, school missions, promotions, you shut it down, or changed the subject, or made it about Jake." Jake shifted, his jaw tightening. "I didn't know," he said softly. "I mean, I knew something was off. You talked different, carried yourself different, but I didn't ask. I guess I didn't want to be the second Winslow." That landed deeper than anything else in the room. I let the silence stretch. Not to punish them, just to let the truth settle. "I didn't stay quiet to hurt you," I said finally. "I stayed quiet to protect myself." Dad rubbed the bridge of his nose, suddenly older than I remembered. "You're telling me that all these years, while we thought you were floundering, you were running operations like that?" "Yes." "And we mocked you?" "Yes." He didn't respond, just stood there, the weight of it folding his shoulders in. Then the door creaked open. Adam stepped in, quiet as always. "You okay?" he asked me. "Yeah," I said. "They just found out I'm not a failure." He looked around the room, then back at me. Took them long enough. A week later, the phone rang just after sunset. It was my father, not a message relayed through Mom, not an email, his voice. "We'd like to have you over," he said, formal, like he was issuing a dinner invitation to a visiting officer. Just us. No neighbors, no speeches. I paused before answering. All right. That Saturday, Adam and I pulled into the driveway I hadn't seen in over a year. The porch light was on, the steps swept clean. The door opened before we knocked. Mom greeted us with a hug that didn't hold too tight. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Inside, the table was already set. Not for show, just simple dishes, cloth napkins, glasses of water already poured. Dad stood when we entered the dining room. I hadn't seen him rise for anyone in years. Claire, he said, would you sit? Dinner was careful, everyone choosing words like stepping stones. Halfway through, he set down his fork and looked straight at me. I've been thinking, he said, and I owe you apologies. Not one, several. He didn't list them, didn't explain. I nodded. That was enough. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. We thought we were protecting you. But maybe we were just shielding ourselves. I didn't answer right away. Then I said I stopped sharing because every time I tried, you turned it into something smaller. I needed to protect what I'd built. Jake, quieter than usual, added, we made it hard for you to be honest. That's on us. No one cried, but something softened, just enough to let the room breathe. 6 months later, I stood on a stage in Washington, the Navy Cross pinned just above my heart. It was one of the rare moments my work was allowed to surface this time, not behind closed doors or buried under clearance levels. Just a name, a face, a medal that said, we see you. In the front row, my family sat together. My mother dabbed her eyes with a cloth handkerchief I hadn't seen since childhood. Jake stood in his seal blues heels, locked spine straight. When I stepped off the platform, he saluted first. My father shook my hand, then pulled me into a brief, unscripted hug. You've redefined what Winslow means, he said. I met his eyes. I didn't do it for the name Dad. I know, he said finally. That's what makes you who you are. Later, someone from the press approached. Colonel Winslow, what does this honor mean to you? I looked past the lights, past the applause, past all the years they didn't see me. And I said, it means I was never lost. A pause. Just never seen.